Hi, this is Stephen Hailstrom, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. This is 92.7 Peterborough Community Radio, and welcome again to our weekly radio show, and it's also a podcast, so please check it out on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And we like to talk about housing. Hey, so let's talk housing. Here we go for this week, and we're especially we're going to have some excerpts from the Pace Talk, a Pace Talk called pacetalks.com, and it's all about why eliminating homelessness should matter to everyone. When you think that the reality is that the simple cure for a lack of housing is a home or more homes, in Canada, as you have heard me say, rant, talk about, it's a supply and demand problem. There is not enough supply, too high a demand. Canada's population is growing, our immigrant population is growing. People are graduating from school, people want places to live, they want to move up in the type of housing that they have, and so there is a higher demand for housing. The higher demand pushes the cost up, and if there is no supply to balance that, to mitigate the cost of housing goes higher. It becomes to a point where it is unaffordable, as it is right now. Average cost housing almost anywhere now is $1 million to buy a house. Rental rates are higher than they have ever been. And so homelessness now, as indicated in here by in this talk, statistically triple the number of people who are underhoused, who are living in homelessness in just 3.5 years. It's tremendous, and it's going nowhere but higher and higher. So, first, this is the Pace Talk from January 25, and here we go. This is Jacqueline Pierce with a great explanation of what it is to be homeless.
The struggle of how homelessness is really a diagnosis of multiple systems that have failed an individual. And so when we often talk about it takes a village to raise a child, each one of these individuals in our community was somebody's child, and they are somebody's family. And we have abandoned them somewhere along the way. And so, prior to the pandemic, reports estimated that the number of homeless individuals in Canada was about 235 to 300,000 people, with 25 to 30,000 people who were homeless on any given night. And that's in a very developed country. And now estimates from our experts in this field reveal that the number of individuals now in 2023 rose to triple that. The lowest estimate is about 700,000 currently. And it's just staggering, actually. And you can see how, that's quite a problem. That's tripled just since 2020. So it's not going away. And Ontario itself, our province, has the highest population of homeless individuals in all of Canada. So the percentage of people in Ontario that are experiencing homelessness in comparison to the rest of Canada is 40%. Of all of the individuals in Canada who are homeless reside in Ontario, with the second runner-up really coming from BC. So you can see how that cost of living really correlates to homelessness. And contrary to the common belief, not everyone who's homeless got there as a result of a mental health challenge or a substance use disorder. And I think that's the biggest fallacy that I see and that I've experienced being a part of this community. In fact, studies have shown that the percentage of individuals who are homeless that actually have a mental health condition is only about 30%. Now, the number of people who end up experiencing a mental health challenge or a substance use disorder after they become homeless certainly rises from there. And you can see the correlation as to how, the living condition then causes that deterioration of both mental, physical, and spiritual health. More than a quarter of individuals that are homeless right now are between the ages of 13 and 21, which I have to tell you, living with a 14-year-old breaks my heart. And a rising number of seniors are finding themselves homeless. They've worked their whole lives and suddenly they can't afford to live in a home any longer. So the question I often get is, why don't these people just go and get a job? And that's a valid question. So what you may not realize is that a quarter of individuals as well, so 25% of individuals who are homeless actually work. And we're seeing that more and more here, at least in London, and I think across the country. A lot of the workers that I even previously employed in my role as a VP for a home and community care organization, some of my personal support workers were homeless. And they were couch surfing, or they were working 3 jobs so that they could sleep on their breaks at their job. And so, homelessness impacts a lot more of people than the ones that we simply see in encampments or on the streets. And so, not only does homelessness cause significant distress and death in our communities, it's pervasive, and negative impact on individuals and society comes with a really expensive price tag for us as Canadians. So in Canada, we spend over $7 billion a year addressing homelessness, and that's from emergency crisis and shelter services, with an additional $299 million that was added to that during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the federal government just injected another $2 million into that. And so for that amount of money, and we're not getting a result, clearly something needs to change, and very rapidly. So why should we care about eliminating a problem that is experienced by less than 2% of our population? We hope our talk tonight will open your mind and heart to consider the very real human and societal costs of a problem that we can actually really easily solve, and for a lot less than we spend today.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Great explanation. And now, a little bit later in the talk, she talks about what it is to be homeless. Like, what does it mean to be homeless? And just how it can affect everything about you. Great way to describe it. Really makes it clear and understanding. If you are listening to this and you have people who are, not sure, or they feel that, they're the people who avert their eyes. They don't look. They are disturbed by people who are on the street. Then listening to Jacqueline talk will really, hopefully, open their eyes to the reality of what it is to be on the street, to live rough, and that it's to put it simple, it's people think it's a choice, but it's not. It's often so stigmatized, and it creates, and you have subgroups that are homeless that include Indigenous people. A huge percentage of homeless people are Indigenous. A large percentage of homeless people come from the LGBTQ community, and the stigma attached to them before they became homeless created the environment to move them into the homeless community and the homeless world. So when you listen to Jacqueline, it'll become very clear and very concise. She's fantastic.
So what is homelessness? We thought it would be helpful to go through the definition, because homelessness isn't just those living outside in a tent. The term homelessness is not just, and I mean, homelessness now isn't just contained to urban centers, as you're experiencing in Cobourg and in towns and cities across Canada. We're seeing homelessness spread throughout our communities. And so while we usually look at the visibility of homelessness, you know, the visibility, the newness, the emerging issues are perhaps now more prevalent, can be associated with many emotions that you might have with having this in your community and being able to see it now. It may have been hidden in the past. A lot of people, we find homelessness also encompasses, so you'll see some of the images on the screen, not just what we call living rough on the streets, which is the encampments and people sleeping outdoors, but we also have people who live in their cars. They live and couch surf. People that are currently in shelters are still meeting the definition of homelessness. They don't have a stable place to call their own. And so, the very visibility of homelessness in your own city, I know for myself, for others, it's very distressing. And it can also bring up, feelings of fear, misunderstanding, and discomfort. And so, there's a lot of different ways that individuals do become homeless. When we look at the trajectory of things that can trigger someone to move into homelessness, you'll see that a lot of these things, when experienced in isolation, I know for myself, we've had family members, others that may experience one of these, really significant events in their life, interruptions, and that in and of itself doesn't lead them down the road of homelessness. However, for a lot of individuals, both that I've interacted with or, that we look at in the literature, homelessness is a result of a complex interaction of a lot of these factors. So usually it's not just one of these things, it's usually a combination that really triggers, sort of like pushes it over the edge, so to speak, right? They don't have a safety net of family. They don't have a widespread connection with friends. They may have a brain injury or a mental health challenge that is happening. And that combined with a loss of a job, poverty, low income, anything else, a change in their family status, they break up with someone, can render them homeless. So there are just really there are tons of pathways that people, and each one is really unique. And so it also is the challenge of when we are trying to create solutions, there is no one solution that is going to help solve homelessness. It's a collective and a community effort, I guess, is the point. So homelessness is, for people that are living in homelessness, it is a complicated reality. The biggest stigma that they face is often that people feel that homelessness is a choice, and that sometimes, that homelessness is a choice or a consequence of making poor choices. But often, and more often than not, it is a circumstance that actually has been inflicted on them for those that are structurally disadvantaged in our society. And what that means is structurally disadvantaged means when people face bias, they face stigma. So a lot of the youth, a percentage, about a third of the youth that are homeless on the streets right now, are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Members, they face bias, stigma within their own families and communities. And so they are no longer welcome in their homes or their populations. A lot of our Indigenous community members find themselves homeless as a result of systems that trap them in between, where they don't quite fit in one category or the other. And they're also the populations that are usually the most discriminated against when it comes to employment. And so that's a lot of the literature has shown that, a lot of people do suffer from become homeless as a result of all of these structural disparities that are happening in our society. And as I quoted earlier, approximately 30% of those who are homeless suffer from a mental illness. And that really can undermine clearly their ability to obtain or maintain housing, incomes, or other necessary supports. But more prominently, there's the reverse effect where people actually end up moving into substance use or mental health challenges as a result of being rendered homeless. And so that's the more frequent complication for them. And the opioid crisis in Canada clearly, no doubt, has contributed to homelessness. The other piece is, policies that have been dismantled. So a lot of our housing policies in the 80s from the federal government and others were disassembled. And that's when we started to see this trend of homelessness really creeping up in Canadian society. And that was the disconnection and the distribution of responsibility for housing amongst three different governments meant that there was really a lack of integration and in the alignment for the strategy around how do we have the right mix of housing and affordability and all of that to keep pace with the growth in our society. So another issue that has been inflicted on citizens that were really doing their best. They could find that they can't afford the housing that's available in their community. And right now, as you know, we are experiencing the highest cost of living that we have in decades, if not ever. And our housing stock is so low, the rental rates in so many communities across Canada. Normally, you could leave the urban centers and go to a smaller center and be able to afford housing, but also be able to build a good life. And now people aren't able to do that as they're moving out of cities. They're finding that the cost of living continues to be high outside of these urban centers.
Thank you for that explanation, Jacqueline. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to explain it. Now, we have the next guest that's brought in this PACE talk. And again, you can join yourself. There's no cost. PACE talks do talks about a variety of different things on a regular basis. This particular one is about eliminating homelessness and why does it matter to everyone. And next is a family physician, Dr. Daniel Pepe. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. It's Pepe, and really good guy. And you'll hear when you hear him talk. And the first segment that I'm going to play for you is really about him talking about the human cost, the cost to that life that that homelessness can create. And one of the quotes, again, as a spoiler alert here, is he indicates, like in the first couple of minutes of saying this, it's just something that breaks your heart to think of. But what it is in the homeless community, the sick become sicker. And really being homeless, many physicians have the opinion that really being homeless is a palliative illness. So palliative means it is an illness that is slowly killing you. It's a palliative illness in slow motion. Actively dying every day a person is that they are homeless. So just by being homeless, you are palliative and actively dying faster than other people, faster than the people who have homes, faster than people who have support, faster than our other friends and family who are not in this position. It's very important to understand just that concept, that just being homeless, that's what happens. Now, here he is, Dr. Daniel Pepe, from the PACE Talk on Thursday, January 25th. Thank you, Doctor.
I think this is where I get to take over a little bit.
Right? You get to kick in on the human cost.
Okay. So the human cost of homelessness, and it's hard to really quantify, to be honest, but I looked at the first bullet point as you were talking, and I'm like mentally getting geared up to switch over to my side. And if you're sick, homelessness makes you sicker. So what does that mean? That means that if I saw you in my family practice, which is where I am now, and you had a little cough and a little pneumonia, which I'm sure most people on this call have had over the course of December to January, because it seems like everyone has been sick in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we'd give you some Symbicort, you'd have some amoxicillin, you might have a post-viral cough that lingers for 8 to 12 weeks, and I'd tell you, I'm sorry, but that's just what's going to happen. Homeless is a lot harder. you're dehydrated, you're cold, you might not have the best nutrition. Your medication might get stolen because someone might think that they're opiates and it's amoxicillin. Your puffer may get stolen because someone may need your puffer and say, I'm sick. They may take your puffer. All of those things are structural and environmental pieces that complicate the nature of being sick, well beyond what even I could comprehend. I didn't really understand how bad it was until I started to go for dinner. And the part that shocked me the most was that people who I thought were really sick and I was really worried about would point and direct me to someone else who was sicker and say, no, help them. And it was shocking. And I kind of get chills sharing that with you. But that's the nature of that community. That community is very tightly integrated, almost like a family. And when you're let into that family, it's a very special gift. And I didn't really understand homelessness as a family physician because we come from a very privileged corner of the city in London. We are guarded away from seeing many individuals who experience homelessness because we have one bus route in and out. And really, unless you have a home or something nearby my office, you have no reason to come here. And that's where we practice family medicine. So going downtown into the core, you get a completely different view of the city. And when I started this job at LHSC, I went and met with the community health center leaders and just had a conversation with them. And the thing that stuck with me from the executive director is Scott Cordes told me that homelessness is basically a palliative illness in slow motion. Well, people are actively dying every day when they are homeless, and they are doing that in slow motion, but in some ways also at an accelerated rate. Because they don't have access to regular primary care. They may not have access to a health card. They may not have access to receive their medications on a regular basis. Even if they go to Emerge and we coordinate a bunch of appointments, they may not have the means and ability to know what day it is to come back on time. And then we, as a structure, the collective we, will then blame them and say, well, you missed your appointment. That was a choice. You missed it, even though they were maybe sleeping outside and had no concept of what day of the week it was. And so hypothermia is a reality, and I've come to understand the nature of hypothermia and frostbite, which I had never seen in medical school, never seen in family medicine residency. Just yesterday, I saw a number of people who had various degrees of frostbite, and I'm trying to increase my knowledge to understand how to help them and what we can do to mitigate that risk, because the loss of digits on dominant hands impacts your ability to work, to participate in society, to obtain a job, to be gainfully employed. And I think, Jacqueline, as I was reading through the statistics in terms of being homeless, and if you're homeless at 25, you're unlikely to meet your 49th birthday. I probably saw just yesterday 4 people who are homeless between the ages of 21 and 30. Their birth years were 1989, 1990, 1999, and I'm going to date myself. I was born in 88. So I'm looking at these people saying that could be me. And I think your comments around it's not a choice. It's very structural things. I mean, I've heard from people who had basement apartments, were gainfully employed. One individual who goes to Sanctuary actually laid the concrete block in our office years ago before we started here, and was shoveling a driveway for a lady whose basement apartment he lived in. He had a heart attack in her driveway, was taken to hospital, received care for over 4 months, and when he came back, all his things were thrown away, his stuff was gone, and he had no place to stay, no way to access his bank accounts, and was instantly homeless because she didn't know where he was or what happened. And after many months, she decided to get rid of all his stuff. And that's how he became homeless. But he was a literal mason who built the building I'm sitting in. So again, all of the assumptions that you make around what you think you know, you probably don't know. And so I think this is why my focus is really looking at making sure that we shift our mindsets. So that's an excellent transition, Jacqueline, because that's exactly where my head was going. It's expensive. It makes sense though why it's expensive, because if you think about the complexities of I'm going to say a regular person or a person not experiencing homelessness, to have a series of appointments, get a number of tests, go to the hospital, go to the clinic, pay for parking, know where to go, show up on time. There are a huge number of assumptions of what has to happen for us to get from point A to point B. And so it makes sense when you don't have any of the advantages that others have, that there is a higher use of emergency departments, because you don't know where the walk-in clinic is, because you don't have internet, because you can't Google their hours, and you don't have the ability to make it to those walk-in clinics. So you go to the one place where you know you can access. It's, as Jacqueline pointed out, it's a survival instinct. There's also a significant cost of shelter and emergency care. Standing up and standing down a winter response year over year is expensive and complicated. I'm sure many of us have sat in meetings with many, many people. Each of those people make a good salary and they spend hours trying to plan the winter response. We barely get it together for winter. Winter's over, we tear it all down. And then in August, we start thinking, winter is coming again. And we do it again. And I think that's where the billions of dollars of funding comes from, is we're not thinking proactively. And I think this is where, as a family doctor, I'm drawn to this work in a lot of ways because I see all of the opportunities for prevention. And on the flip side, I see how all of the missed care and miscoordination is really distressing for not only the people delivering the care, not only the people who are trying to help, but also those who are trying to get help, those experiencing homelessness. It's a collectively traumatic event that happens over and over and over again. And it really depletes your hope and your ability to think that we can actually solve it. It's very defeating when year over year we do the same thing. People are outside cold. We need to do this. We need to do a drive. As a family doctor, I say, let's go in and let's figure out what's going on and try and get to the structural and root causes. We haven't talked to a great degree about the impact on small businesses and urban centers and rural centers, but we know that's a reality because people are experiencing significant challenges in terms of the weather. They seek out heat, warmth, and shelter anywhere they can. They're not doing it on purpose to be bad. They're not trying to disrupt businesses. They're literally trying to survive. I learned a couple of weeks ago that the sewer vents in our city are very hot and that you can cook an egg on them if you wanted to. I didn't know this, but that's where they gather because that's where the warm steam is coming up to stay warm. I didn't know that. So these are all things where we make assumptions about why someone is somewhere and we just don't know. And I think if I was to offer one piece of advice as a family doc in this talk, I'd say don't make assumptions because you don't know. And until you go and talk, you won't know. So learn more, get curious. There you go. So I didn't know what I was doing when Jacqueline invited me to go to Sanctuary. I literally showed up with a backpack and just said hi. Like, they asked me, "Are you a doctor?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm a community member with a bit of medical expertise," because I didn't want to go as the clinician in the white coat who's going to tell you what to do, because I honestly didn't know what to do. But what I did was I asked a lot of questions. Why do you do that? What happens here and there? How do you get help if you need help? Where do you go for medications? And through that questioning, I've come to learn how you can actually find solutions. And I only learned that ability through Jacqueline. When you come through medical school and you're trained, you're taught, you have knowledge and skills, and you can go and solve people's problems. But in order to actually help individuals who are experiencing homelessness and solve the problem, you have to get super curious and very humble, and you cannot make any assumptions about what you think you know. Because oftentimes when you make those assumptions, you will end up doing extra work that's irrelevant. You might cause unintentional harm. You will waste a whole bunch of money. And when we talk about some of the solutions we've done, you're going to laugh because it's very, very simple, but it's highly effective. So I think extending kindness and compassion to every person is exactly what you have to do. If we go over to the next slide here, community solutions. So there's a bunch of things, especially around continuum of affordable housing. And I think this is something that's gaining traction provincially around not everybody needs a 2,000 square foot home on a big lot with a pool and a fence and all that stuff. They may have different needs, and we have to think about what those needs are for individuals. So in London, we've seen little tiny homes. We've seen resourcing for encampment because people don't feel safe to be inside. Obviously, being inclusive for all citizens is very important. And maybe, Jacqueline, is now a good time to share some of the little solutions we've done in terms of helping individuals?
Hi. Just wanted to wa- wanted to now just interrupt a little bit and then add in, and then we're going to hear from the doctor again. Only this time he's going to talk a little bit about some very creative solutions in the healthcare world and workarounds, you'd call it, or ways to make things happen that are very interesting, very creative, and I'm very hopeful that nobody goes back to this wonderful doctor and says, "Hey, what are you doing? That's not really standard procedure," or something like that, because sometimes you have to be able to expedite things to get things done when you know they have to be done. You don't want to take advantage of the system, but you want to be able to know how to work with it when there are real emergency situations where things really need to be done. And these are some great examples. Take it away again, Doctor.
So I'll give you guys a couple examples because I think they're very cool. They warm my soul very much. And I think it'll give you some examples of what you could do. Because you may say, I don't know how to build housing. I don't know how to do a continuum of housing. And I don't know how I can be inclusive for all people. And I don't know where to even begin. So as an example, one individual we met is about this close to returning to work, but his shoulder is a disaster. He injured it in a different province, came here and needed surgery. And so without even having met him, I was just working through the community support workers, and this is the trust piece. They had informed me what was wrong with his shoulder. So I asked him a few questions about, can he do this? Can he do this? Can he do this? And we submitted a requisition for an x-ray and an ultrasound because thankfully he actually had a health card, which is a barrier for a huge number of people. After getting that done, we found that he had significant problems in his rotator cuff, couldn't lift his arm, couldn't move it, and he wouldn't be able to work unless we fixed it. So I spoke to one of the surgeons and I said, I've got a guy I need some help with. So I just reached out to a friend and say, you're a friend, you understand shoulders, help me understand what I need to do for this individual. And he said he needed an MRI. So here we have the problem of coordinating an MRI with a dye injection for an individual who's living in an encampment, who doesn't have a way to orient himself to time, space, or the day because days blend into weeks, blend into months. And so what we did was we went to the most senior leaders in the hospital, presidents of the hospital, leads of diagnostic imaging, and I said, I have a problem, I need your help. So this is the community solutions.
And now the last part we're going to hear from Dr. Pepe is about community solutions, about things that work in the community to make, again, to actually make things happen. You know, really makes me smile. I love to hear about solutions. Not just, we're thinking about this, we're planning this, we're doing that. I want to hear real solutions. And these are some of them.
And they said, well, maybe we can work to help him get that imaging. And again, as a family doc, I'm sitting here ordering imaging for many of my patients. And I noticed the pattern on one of the requisitions is that if we click the button that says WSIB, which is Workplace Safety Insurance Board, that scan seems to happen in a week. But if I just didn't click that box, it took many, many, many months. So I asked the question, I got curious, and I said, there seems to be a process to expedite scans if it's WSIB. Could we test the concept just once of seeing if we could expedite a scan for someone who's experiencing homelessness? And the answer was from the leadership, and this is why you need brave leaders and courage. I think we probably should put under community solutions as well. They said, sure, let's try it. So we got an MRI within 10 days, but the challenge was we couldn't actually find the patient. So on the day of the scan, we didn't know where he was. So he missed it. And I called him and I said, it's 2 hours to the test. We don't know where he is. So then what were we? We were open to understanding that maybe we were a little bit too quick because it takes time to find and identify people and find out where they are. And so we needed to adjust our expectations. And so we did, and we were able to get him the scan. And now we're on to solving the next problem of, okay, the MRI confirms what the ultrasound shows. He's got a really bad shoulder. How do we get him on to the next step? And how do we support him moving forward? So that's where we are now. And we are doing this literally one step at a time, problem by problem, person by person, because everyone is unique. They have a different set of scenarios and problems and expectations and experiences. And you cannot apply a broad brush to a very heterogeneous group, which sounds like a lot of work and it's very overwhelming. But what we've seen over time is as we do this for one individual, now we've learned a way to expedite imaging for everyone. And the even cooler part is that as we design these pathways, they actually work for everybody else too. So I know we have to get on with time, but I'm going to tell one other 1 minute story and then I'll shut up. So the other story is we had a guy who was very hesitant to go to the hospital. He needed about 5 different appointments in a single day, which would normally be 3 hospital campuses, multiple hours of appointments, multiple parking over the course of months. We were able to coordinate 4 different diagnostic tests and imaging tests in a 2-hour period from 12 to 2, and we got him his own porter. So you guys probably have porters in your hospital. They take people from point A to point B. This porter was assigned to this patient to make sure he didn't get lost, he had a good experience, he was safe, and that someone was advocating for him every single step of the way. Kind of like a concierge or someone at an airport. So that's a very simple intervention for a very narrow segment of the population, individuals experiencing homelessness who are at very high risk. But I'm sure all of your brains could imagine. Imagine if you had that for your appointments. And what if we coordinated them really effectively? And what if we gave you your own PSW so that if your mother-in-law with dementia was going and she was confused or scared, we had somebody to hold her hand and take her. So this is why you should care. Because as we develop these solutions for this very, very small segment of the population, it turns out they actually work really well for everyone else. And this is the thing that gets me super energized about this work, because the problem of homelessness is so pervasive and so significant that everyone is willing to get behind it and solve for it. And then it cracks open the door for us to fix all the other stuff that we need to fix. So I'll be quiet now, Jacqueline. Thank you so much.
And now really is going to be the conclusion of this meeting, this PACE talk. And in this, Jacqueline will kind of round things up and then end with a quote and a poem by a gentleman, Daniel, who has lived experience. It's a beautiful poem. I'm going to finish with that, and then I'll do a final little bit of discussion about our show this week, and really appreciate everybody listening. Thank you.
So I just wanted to end our talk today really quickly by, I love this quote. And, for all of you that are on the call, I'm so thankful that you're here tonight. It shows already that you have open hearts and open minds. And I do believe that that is the strength of any community. So all of you contribute to that strength. And so I thank you for that. And I think the greatest thing in this post-pandemic world that we have, the greatest threat that we face is really that fear and mistrust of each other and the polarization that has happened, not just in our ideologies, but in our income, our opportunities, and our ability to meet our basic needs. And so if we can band together, for those that need us most, I think that makes a stronger society overall. And the data is really clear that our society is only as strong as the commitment that we have to include every member in it. And so as we end our presentation, my friend Dan, I asked him to share a poem that he wrote. I heard it last night, and it's really a tribute to one of our community members. We lost a member of the sanctuary community and a community member in London on one of the coldest nights of the year in one of our parks. And, no one was there to witness their death. And so I just asked him, as part of his processing that experience, he wrote this incredible poem, and it's very powerful. And I thought I'd let him share it with you to end our talk today. So thank you for inviting us.
This world is not for them. And in the metropolis without a soul, the necropolis that hates itself, where the hard-hearted walk past urban campers, laid out on the street, avoiding eye contact, rushing, walking past those sleeping rough, nameless, faceless, perceived as unreal, not persons, not worth attention, not any intervention nor mention, not a call to 911 emergency, a cry for help for the excluded falls on deaf ears. Here, where the unloving walk past Angel Street, where rough sleepers are left for dead between the Roman Catholic Cathedral and the Baptist Church. Some who have not been there, not knowing differently, seem not to flinch, buying body bags before food and soup, clothing before offering safe shelter or a good roof. Pretenders like that hoard up dead capital stuffed in mattresses for the end of the world. Cash cannot be served in the soup kitchen as food, loving the dark root, bitter stew. And those enduring persevering poverty on these mean streets are found dead in the park in the middle of winter. No friend or family close by to call for help. Rest in peace.
Wow. Powerful words. Powerful, powerful words that we all have to understand. First, for this week, I really need to thank Pace Talk and specifically Jacqueline Pierce and Dr. Daniel Pepe. for doing this and presenting all of this information. And by the way, just so again to reiterate, it's pacetalks.com. They have talks on a regular basis about different things. It's a speaker series, and this one is why. This one we've just listened to segments from is why eliminating homelessness should matter to everyone. And it should, it needs to, it has to matter to everyone. It affects all of us. We can't just ignore it. One of the things for me personally, what I imagine, right, and whether it's someone I see on the street or someone I see in distress or someone even that I've just seen on the news is convicted of some even heinous crime, I imagine them as a little baby. For me, I have 3 children, 2 grown up, 1 in high school, and for me, they were all home births, so I was there catching them when they were born. And for me, it's like I imagine every person, no matter what happens to them during their life, they start out as this wonderful little creature that has all the potential and everything. And I think as a society we need to remember this and honor it, even when we see people who we can feel naturally, repulsed by, put off by. We feel we can judge them. We feel we can just ignore them as part of our society and just imagine that they're gone. And the reality is that all of these circumstances have been created by the society that we live in. Homelessness and the lack of housing. This program is about talking about housing, right? So this lack of housing is a result of our own society, of the way that we have allowed it to grow and become. That that we have the people who have and the people who have not. All of these things are things that we have created ourselves in our own society, in our own world, and we are responsible for as a big community, the community of Canada, the community of Ontario, the community of Northumberland, or of Peterborough County, of Peterborough. These are our people. They were our babies. We need to look after them. And we need to get them homes. And we need to get everybody else a home. We need to be able to, I need to know that my daughters, even with decent jobs, can afford to have a home. And we need to work hard every day to make sure this happens in one way, shape, or form. And we need more people speaking out just like these guys, who are telling people and instructing them that, life is tough, circumstances happen, and it's not just about being a bad person and you're on the street. It is. It's just what can happen so easily. Anyway, on a positive note, there remain lots of things. It looks like, from what I'm reading in the news, in all of my feeds about housing and everything else, it looks like 2024 is going to be a fabulous year for housing. So please, call me, contact me, reach out, be on my program. Come on. Love to have you. This is Stephen Hailstrom for Housing. This is Stephen Hailstrom for Let's Talk Housing. I have to remember the name of my own program. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, great week, whatever you're doing. Take care. Peace.